Good evening. Thanks for all of you who are coming, especially good news that all of you who were here last time are back again. That's encouraging. And so welcome as well to those of you who are enjoying this presentation, or this set of presentations, this as the first one and didn't get in on the last one. You will be able to watch the previous one on YouTube if you haven't had a chance yet. As Mike said, the name Synod of the Trinity, as far as conversation with people goes, that's with Mike Givler, who is the tech host for the evening. You'll be able to communicate specifically with him, especially if you have any communication connection problems. Elizabeth will be so busy with giving you good content that she will not be in a position to deal with any kind of technical issues. And I am good for being good looking, and that's about all I'm here for. So in fact, in view of that reality, I'm going to hide my video pretty quickly because you'll get more out of it that way. But like we mentioned last time, one of the sort of hidden treasures that we have within the Synod staff is that Elizabeth knows more about how to find money out in the wider world than we have given her the opportunity to show to the rest of you. And so just as I mentioned, I want once again for that ability to become something that is passed out widely so that you all can find things that are useful to your churches and your ministries and your presbyteries. So with that in mind, Elizabeth, thank you for what you plan to give us this evening. And I look forward to hearing it myself.
Boris, thank you so much for that gracious introduction. It's very kind. Friends, I am delighted to see so many of you here. Some faces I know and so many faces I don't know. And I just appreciate you sharing your evening with me. I know it's a spring week. There's lots of places you could be, lots of things you could be doing. We have so much information to cover this week, more so than last week. So I will do my best to get through it all. And just a little bit of highlights before we get started. I provided several examples of different parts of a proposal. I'm not going to go over those slides with you. So if we see an example that's a few paragraphs long, it's a good one. I want you to go back and look at it because it will help you. But we're not going to take the time to read through it together. So if there's anything else I skip through, I will let you know. And this is definitely coming your way to look at on your own. So let's get started. You see, I'm trying to share. Okay. Can you all see that okay? Excellent. So tonight we're writing a grant and we're figuring out where to get started. And I wish it were as simple as pick up your pen and go. It's not. But it will be soon for you because after tonight, you will be able to stock up your writing pantry and your spice rack with all the grant soup essentials, write a compelling letter of inquiry, and prepare a solid grant proposal. For those of you who don't know what a letter of inquiry is, we are going to spend time on that this evening. And that is something that helps you and the potential funder not waste time, right? So rather than spending hours and hours and hours on a proposal, you would reach out to the funder and say, hey, this is what we're interested in doing. This is why, this is how we're going to impact. Would you like to see more? The purpose of a letter of inquiry is to really pique their interest, get them to engage, and encourage them to say, yeah, this is something we could get behind. We want to see more of that. So the first thing we need to do, and this is by no means an exhausted list. This is something I want you to come back to in your own time. It's very important that your pantry is stocked. Technically, your pantry is a file folder, right, in Word, but for our intents and purposes, and keeping this slightly less dry of a presentation than it's already going to be, we're calling it a pantry. So these are things that you absolutely will need, whether you are doing a letter of inquiry, whether you are doing a proposal, and depending what type of proposal you're doing, depending if a funder says, I would like to see this or that, or if they don't say anything, and you can tell from your experience with them that you should err on the side of providing everything. These are things that we need to have in place. And if you have them in place, writing proposals is going to be much easier, because you'll already have what you need and you will just be able to tweak it for each different foundation. So once you've done a few proposals, you will know how to manage your time and be able to better say, hey, I think it'll take me this long to do this. And B, know what you need, right? I have that in my pantry. I can use all those things. Oh, they're asking for this. Okay, so I'll have to take some time to do that. But you should be able to just look in your pantry and have the majority of things that are being required in a proposal available to you at your fingertips or at your mouse, however you want to say that. So your pantry's stocked. We're going to test a recipe. Before we test a recipe, I'd like to note that there are many things in the letter of inquiry and in the proposal that cross over. So we'll be going through everything we need for our letter of inquiry, and then we'll be going through what we need for a proposal. When we get to the proposal, I'm not going to go over all these things again that we already went over with the letter of inquiry. I'm going to introduce new things to you. So that's something to bear in mind, and I'll remind you later. So what do we need? This doesn't look terrible, right? We need 8 things. That's not so bad. We know that this is kind of a summary of a bigger proposal. Of course, we need a title page. What should be on that? Well, all the things you already know, your contact info, the date, the mailing address. Friends, bear in mind, this is 2023. I personally often forget that. I perpetually think it's 1999, but people want your email address. Even if you sent this proposal via email, which you probably did, it still should be on the title page, because they will share it in a batch with their board or their review team, and they'll want that information. This is a great place for you to grab them by sharing a little bit about your mission statement, just a brief quote, right? Get them interested in who you are. Sure, they've got your contact and so forth, but who are you, right? Photos. It's a great place for photos, especially if this is something that's a recognizable endeavor, right? So for example, we'll go back to our food insecurity because we talked a lot about that last week. I know many of you are here for that reason. If you're seeking to get money for a food pantry or a soup kitchen, pictures of that in action are fantastic for your title page. Your introduction. This should be pretty basic. This is your opportunity to briefly, I cannot emphasize briefly enough, and that message is for me too. I tend to be very verbose. You're going to share the geographic and social situation that you're addressing. Who are you serving? Why? What's the need? Tell me about these people. And assess your audience, right? If you're going after a foundation in the town you live in, they're already going to have a good idea of the population, of who you serve, and of the needs. But if you're writing away, let's say you're in Erie and you're writing to a big foundation in Philadelphia or New York, they're not going to know anything about your region necessarily. Just assume they don't, and they're not going to know who you're serving. So you want to be very, very particular in those moments. Here's a pro tip. It's easier to write this introduction after you've written your narrative and needs statement, because this is like a 2 or 3 sentence summary of what you're asking. So bear that in mind. So what's a needs statement? It sounds interesting, right? Doesn't quite sound like a thesis. A need statement is clearly sharing the problem, the gap, right? And what's the problem? How do you know it's a problem? How do I know that childhood hunger is a problem? Well, because so many kids aren't able to access the lunch program at school because their parents can't pay the lunch tab, right? That would be an example. So what's the problem? Childhood malnutrition. How do we know? They don't have food. They don't have lunch, right? So your needs statement is what's the problem and how do you know it's a problem? You're going to notice as we go through this that writing a proposal is very formulaic. There's a little creativity, but essentially this is a writing formula. And you're going to keep it simple, right? So a persuasive statement, the foolproof recipe. You're going to always keep it simple. Zone in on one major issue, right? We can zone in on food insecurity, but if we're going after a grant, we need to zone in on something specific, right? We're zoning in on children living below the poverty line that are hungry. Oh, well, how do you know you have those? How do you know how much money you need to meet these needs? Well, statistics and data, or else what you're saying is worthless, right? Talk is cheap. So you need to back up what you are saying throughout your grant with statistics and data. And then make the emotional connection. Pull on the reader's heartstrings. Tell a story. Tell a story about someone who was hungry or about a child who was impacted by what you're doing. Describe the obstacles of what you're trying to do. Gee, we need to provide $5,000 worth of school lunches and we only have $1,200. This is a major obstacle, right? And convey the sense of urgency. It's already halfway through the school year. These kids need food. So keep it simple. Stats and data, emotional connection, describe your obstacles, and always convey a sense of urgency. Here's an example. This is what I was talking about that we're not going to go through together because we have such limited time tonight, but please go back and read it. Organizational history. This really doesn't sound interesting, right? You're like, I've worked here for years. I know what this organization's about. Well, yeah, but not everybody does, right? A lot of people don't know what the Synod does. If I were to write a grant, I would have to give a full description as this is what we do. This is who we are. So tell a story. How did it get started? Why? What happened recently? Well, gee, recently, things have been pretty bad with COVID and people haven't been giving in the collection plate. We don't have enough money to start a food pantry. We don't have enough money to, make the repairs on our roof. But when we started this, we had over 200 people banging down our doors for food. And we had, over 1,000 in our congregation when this church started in 1909. So once you shared who you are and where you came from, again, you're going to go back to recent events. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad event like COVID or less money in the collection plate. It can just be organizational changes. Gee, we added this new branch. We took on this new initiative. It was super successful, but now financially we need to shore up because we can't provide for all our initiatives. We need help. Or again, something negative like we had budget cuts, which everyone in the world can relate to. All right. So the program or project narrative. This is how you execute your recipe, right? So you are letting your audience know that this is how you're going to meet this need and what you're going to meet. So you get to articulate, basically the goals and the objectives of the project. Here's the important piece of this slide. Some goals should be both achievable and visionary. And some goals should be specific and measurable. And you should provide a very brief plan of action. So what does that mean? Let's talk a little bit more about those different kinds of goals that can be confusing. Oh, my slide skipped over. Okay, so before we talk about other kinds of goals, let's talk about the fact that we can have more than one objective, right? And an objective is not an action, it's a result. So you want to see that 200 people were fed. That's an objective. An action would be, I'm going to feed as many people that come through the door. Your objectives and your goals need to directly relate to your statement of need. They need to link it, obviously, in the mind of anyone reading it. There should be no question. So specific goals. A specific goal is something like this. This project is to increase the participation of youth aged 9 to 15 through Baylor County to embrace more reading, right? Probably $100,000. The visionary goal doesn't have any numbers. It doesn't talk about ages 9 through 15. It doesn't talk about where. It doesn't talk about money. It says to give birth to a widespread community understanding of cultural heritage. So that's really broad and hard to measure. That request could be for $500, $500,000, $1 million. Visionary goals are very, very hard to forecast cost for. But the reason we keep them in there is because they're a critical component of persuasive writing when we're talking about grants. We went over objectives a little bit, right? So my large objective here would be to identify a site and conceptual design for a facility where residents and visitors can learn about the natural history, geology, and resources of the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon by fall of 2025. Well, great. What does that mean? Break it down for me. How are these objectives achievable? Because if I'm a funder, I'm saying that sounds nice. What are you really going to do? Well, I'm going to have a field trip program. And that's going to be done by the end of 2023 for kids kindergarten through 12th grade. Also going to design an awareness campaign because maybe people aren't aware that there's a Grand Canyon in Pennsylvania. Maybe not. So we want to raise that awareness by 45%, if that's possible. Gee, you know, state park memberships are going down so much so that state parks are having to close. So we want to go from 3 state park purchases, membership passes, to 89 that are purchased at our site. And furthermore, we're going to attract 20 ambassadors for the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon by December 2023. Those, my friends, are achievable objectives that link to your goals, that link to your mission statement, right? Everything is holding hands in a circle. You know how you see those little images of a globe with little people holding hands around it? That's how your grant needs to function. So the timeline of the letter of inquiry, how long is this going to take? It's a good question, right? So a capital improvement project could take a while, but you may just need money for a portion of that. So if you have approximate dates, you could say that by something very basic, like my timeline is January 2024 through March 2024. But what if you can't start the project until you have the money? You still need to tell them what this looks like. Nobody just wants to give random money without having any sense of time attached to it. So you're going to say, well, once we get started, you know, it's going to take about 1.5 years, 18 months. Or maybe going back to our capital improvements, maybe we know some of the specifics, but not all of them, right? We're trying to start this soup kitchen. So we would say, well, you know, we really want to commission it by 2023, final or June 2023, final design in place by November. And we're going to have the opening by February 2025. Great. When are you going to be able to feed people? No later than the third week of February 2025. So those are some examples of valid timelines. The timeline can really be challenging when you have components that aren't funded yet. And it's okay to use approximate dates. It's okay if the funder comes back to you and says, you really think you can get this done between January 2024 and March 2024? Well, I do, because X, Y, Z. Or, well, I don't know. What do you think? Always good. Again, we talked about this last week. Always good to go back to your funder and say, gee, what are your thoughts on this? You've probably funded projects like this before. They're your partner. Your funder is your partner. We're not going to talk as much about relationship dynamics tonight. This is specifically about the proposal. But let's bear in mind, whether they fund this or not, they may fund something in the future. Therefore, we treat them with the respect and care that we would treat any friend. All right, the letter of inquiry, the budget summary. This is not scary, folks. Some of us didn't like math in high school, myself included. This is not scary, I promise. So you're sharing, this is how much it costs. This is how I'm going to get the money, and this is what I'm going to do with the money. Cost, raising, spending. Very basic. Here's a great example, which you can go back and read later. I know you all will. So the future funding section, you may or may not need this, right? This depends. Are you doing a one-time project? Are you seeking to implement programming like a soup kitchen that you plan to sustain indefinitely? If so, it's good to share that someone else has already given you some buy-in on this project, right? It's good to share your other partners. So we have this soup kitchen, and we're also going to be leasing part of it to the food pantry. Food pantry is going to pay $15,000 a year, and we're going to put all that money back into the facility and the property. So this boosts credibility hugely if you already have those support partners, if you already have people in your corner and you want to share that. We're going to move on to the grant proposal now. We did a little basic bread making there. We're going to make a whole grain loaf now. You can see that some of these are highlighted. Those are the ones that we are going to go over tonight, because the other ones we've already gone over in our letter of inquiry. So we're not going to redo all of those going through the proposal. Let's pause now for questions. Mike, are you seeing any?
I'm not. If you have a question for Elizabeth, feel free to either raise your digital hand or put something in the chat.
Okay. So moving on. Let's talk a little bit about the organizational description. And I know you're thinking, wait a minute, we already did organizational history. How much can there really be to say?
There is one question, Elizabeth, is is
Okay.
the letter of inquiry like a cold call?
That's an excellent question. It can be. It can be like a cold call. If it's a cold call, you can be a little bit less detailed in the information about your partners that you might share, right? Because you don't know, they may have pre-existing relationships with that organization, with that foundation, and so forth. And so that's not for you to stick your oar into. But absolutely, if you plan on doing a cold call, I recommend an actual call first. Call them, get a sense of whether they're interested in seeing anything at all before you put together a letter of inquiry. That would be my best bet. If you can't reach anyone, if no one's getting back to you, go ahead and say, hey, I tried to email, I tried to call, but I didn't hear back. So I just wanted to send you a little bit about our organization. This is the project we're working on. This is the budget. We would really love to have you as a partner. Okay, so organization description, let's talk about that. That is who you are, right? Tell me about who you are, not where you came from and what you're doing, but who you are right now. You're a group of 10 employees, 4 of which grew up in that church that you're employed by, whatever it is, just a very brief description of who you are. Then you're going to talk about structure and current programming. So the best way to do this, and I know that it's not the most exciting way, but it is to create an organizational chart. Now, why do I say that? You could just list everyone, right? Providing an employee list. These folks are reading through a whole lot of words. If you can break it up with some graphics, if you can break it up with some images, that not only appeals to them as the reader, but it gives it a little color. So this is an opportunity, particularly when we're talking about an organizational structuring, staff, so forth. This is where you can shine with your graphic skills, right? Bearing in mind that the purpose of you providing this is because you're building credibility. You're letting them know, hey, we are a stable organization with strong leadership. We have this person who's been here XYZ. We have this person who's done this, so on and so forth. Be sure just to note the population you serve at the top of your chart, right? It reminds the reviewer that you know what you're doing, and it's not just about who works there. You're not serving who works there. You're serving the population. So here's an example, right? So, who are we serving? Senior citizens of Chad County, which means the director of communications isn't serving the finance officer. That's not how we're thinking about this. We're thinking about this as a team serving Chad County. Now, here's another pro tip. Remember how we were talking about keeping your pantry stocked and being able to just go into that file folder and say, I need this, this, and this, and quickly put it into the grant you're working on. Here's an example of that. So keep this in 2 sizes, one that fits a full page and one that fits a half page and can be put into the body of a proposal. It's super simple to have that on hand. Takes no time at all. And once it's done, it's done. So we can see here, wow, the executive director has been there since 95. That's great. Even the admin assistant, been there 11 years. Wow, okay. This is a stable organization. Good to know. Would you want to put up those details on if you had had a major shakeup and almost the whole staff was new? Not necessarily. You might want to introduce a paragraph saying, we're excited to roll out our new team, and here it is. But you wouldn't necessarily want to say, hey, our executive director, he's been here 6 weeks, and our senior liaison, well, she came on yesterday. That's not going to be a vote of confidence for you. Moving on to the operating plan. And I want to go back to that statement I made about this being a dry presentation. It is dry, friends, because all of this sounds very dry. Because you're taking a living, breathing, amazing organization doing great work and putting it on paper. So when you look at this paper, let it come alive for you and let it come alive for the reader. Let them know this isn't just paper. This is an amazing, impactful organization. It's not as dry as it may look. So an operating plan is basically what needs to happen in order to complete your goals and objective of each fiscal year, right? And your goals and objectives usually come about through the strategic planning process, staff and board, if you're a typical nonprofit. If you are a new organization looking to get seed money, we're not going to talk a lot about that today, but you are welcome to contact me later. But if that's the case, you absolutely need to have a solid ironclad operating plan and a solid budget for anyone to give you a buy-in. So what's an operating plan? What do I have to put in this thing? Well, guess what? Your new best friend, Madam Detail. Madam Detail shows up a lot in your pantry. She's everywhere. You want a lot of her, not enough that it's overwhelming, but definitely enough to say this is what's guiding our work. And you want a format that allows for regular progress reports and check-ins, because your funders will ask for those. Hey, tell me about those goals and objectives. Where are you now? It's been 3 months. And you should be able to look at the structure of your operating plan and line it up side by side with your strategic plan and see a lot of complementary points there. So here's a basic list of things. Maybe not so basic, but you can digest it later. This will be sent to you. Don't feel like you need to write down every slide. This is what absolutely needs to be in your operating plan, right? And again, here we have our executive summary. Write this last because it's easiest, but it needs to be first in order of your operating plan. Things we've talked about: description of your organization, your mission statement. Goals, again, take them from the strategic plan. They should be reflective and complementary there. Objectives, make sure they're measurable, right? We want to feed 1,000 people, not we want to impact all the hungry people in our county. What does that mean, right? Need to be measurable and express an outcome, not an activity. Your plan of action. That's exactly what it sounds like, friends. That's a set of action steps for each objective. And within those steps, someone needs to be assigned or else it's not happening, right? So you're assigning a person or a position to oversee those actions. And a timeline, which we already talked about, right? So this wasn't scary. You already have all these things. You're just saying them differently. You're presenting them differently. All right. The project or program narrative. This is important. This is your opportunity to describe in detail what you're doing to address the specific issue that you shared in your needs statement, right? This is the vision of my project, and this is the approach. This is what I'm going to do to make it work. And again, those hands around the globe that we talked about, how we see little people holding hands around a globe, you're tying your project to your mission and to the main purposes and goals of your organization, main endeavors of your organization. You're showing that you understand the issue. Well, how do you do that? Statistics and facts, right? You know your stuff. You're going to give a brief summary of program that should say implementation, how you plan to implement it, not implantation. I will correct that before I send it to you. Who are you serving? How are you going to find these people? You want to serve 1,000 hungry people. Well, where are they and how are you going to connect with them? Who do you have that knows them? Who do you have committed specifically to outreach? And going back to our action plan and timeline, give a quick summary. What does summary mean? Summary means 2 or 3 sentences. Anytime I say summary, unless I delineate otherwise, it means 2 or 3 sentences. How are you going to feed these hungry people? Do you have robots? Who do you have? Well, we've got volunteers, we've got staff. Make sure you share that. So you'll note that a lot of our pro tips are very similar, right? They say things like, write this after you've written that. Here's another one of those. Write the narrative after you've figured out your goals, your objectives, your action plans, your timeline, your budget, your measurements, valuation method, all these things. Write that afterwards. So even though it's going to be the meat of your proposal, whenever you look at the order of topics in your proposal, the narrative is going to be the meat of it right in the center. You're going to write it after you sort out your details. All right, finally, you get to put this thing into action. You've said who you want to serve, what you want to do, why you need to do it. You've backed it up with statistics. This is what you're going to do. Here's your step-by-step plan. And you're going to go back to the objectives that you nailed down earlier. And you are going to link your step-by-step actions to each objective. So I don't want to stress anyone out here, but your action plan truly can make or break whether these people fund you. Because it's great to be able to say convincingly, there are hungry people that need to be fed. 1,000 people need food. How are you going to do it? Well, we're going to give them food. Not good enough. Well, we're going to contact this person, this organization. We're going to line up volunteers. We're going to line up donations, in-kind donations. We've got chickens coming in for Purdue. We've got food coming in from Weiss Market, XYZ. We've got volunteers to give it out, right? So you get it. Details. Details are very important. Your action plan is very important. It needs to be convincing. To say details are important is the biggest understatement in grant writing. So we already said each task needs to be linked to an objective, right? You should have a couple tasks for each objective. Double check. Have someone else look. I'll be honest with you, whenever I do anything at all, really, I have Mike look at it again. Does this look right? Is everything matching? So have you shown all your tasks be necessary? Be specific. Begin each task with a verb. So let's look at our sample. Hire, hires a verb. Hire an architect. Order 20 new computer stations. Order, establish a policy review committee, right? These are all action items and they all link to your objectives. They have to. If they're just out there on their own, or if there's an objective with no action items, you have a very weak proposal. So now, here we are with our budget and our timeline, our responsible entity for each task. An entry for your action plan should look like this, right? You can see in February, the capital campaign committee is going to hire an architect. And this architect is amazingly affordable, only $500. Details are really important. Also, your action plan links to what? Your budget. Your action plan is going to help you develop your budget. So when we're talking about an actual action item and tracking it, it could be as simple as this. You could have a tab in Excel for each objective related to your project. And you could have action item, who's responsible and when is it supposed to happen? Everybody accounts for that differently. Some people, put a strike through the line once it's done, or they give the actual date it's done. Some people go through and shade the different Excel cells, a different color. You'll figure out your way. All right. How do we prove that we've done it? How do we prove that we've fed 1,000 people? How do we evaluate that? Has to be measurable, right? You have to have an evaluation plan in place. This gives you a space to talk about what should be achieved. It also can create really good press for your program, right? If we give out a grant at the Synod and the person who receives the grant does something amazing, what do? I email Mike and I'm like, hey, this is great press for our grants. Can you put this on the website? And what does that do? That gives credibility to the peacemaking grant or the innovation grant or whatever grant we are supporting in that moment. This gives you credibility for your organization. And it speaks loudly to other funders and future funders. Say, hey, maybe we'll consider them in the future. So what does an evaluation look like? This is when things get technical, right? This is maybe when we feel out of our comfort zone. Well, how can I evaluate whether we're providing nutrition? I don't know anything about nutrition. I eat a burger every day. I don't know. This is what it looks like. So to get a sense of what your evaluation needs to look like, answer these questions. Just sit down, answer them. And if you can't answer them right away, call your colleague. Call someone else involved in proofreading this. Because if you can't answer them, something is off with your goals and objectives, right? once you've thought through those, you get to figure out what kind of evaluation you want. You get to choose that. So folks, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm giving you all of this information, but I deeply believe that A, you may have funders that don't ask for an evaluation, although you should give one, because that only makes you look good and more professional. And B, you likely will only ever be asked to have an in-house evaluation team, because I know that the friends I'm with tonight work with churches, work with smaller organizations. So starting at the bottom, a professional evaluator, that would be maybe I work for National Institute of Health. I got a huge grant. That would be the time for a professional evaluator. But when we're talking about our soup kitchen that's attached to, First Presbyterian, Second Presbyterian, 200th Presbyterian Church, whatever, then we're talking about an in-house evaluation team, right? Someone on staff, someone on your committee, your board, your volunteer, maybe the person running the program, designate one of them to be your main evaluator. It may not be the most objective or methodical, but honestly, it may be, because guess what? We're our worst critics, right? We are our worst critics. So if I think that this food pantry that I've been running is doing a miserable, horrible job, I'm probably going to say it. And I'm probably going to say why and know exactly why. Maybe even better than an outside evaluator. All right. You may get an outside evaluation team. Your funder may say, we really want to give you more money in the future, but we'd love to know what this other soup kitchen thought of how you're doing, or what this food pantry or what the United Way thought of what you're doing. Mind if we use someone in the field, a community leader? Do you know anyone? Sure, no problem. In this case, though, you are going to provide a small honorarium, anywhere from $100 to $500 per person. That's important to do. They are taking time, very valuable time, to help you. Any questions?
One in the chat, Elizabeth, are there funders who require applicants to use the funder's own standardized form?
Yes, there are. And by having that's a great question, by the way, friends. There are a lot of those, especially as we get more and more into funders that say, hey, apply online. By that, I mean, apply through my website. However, they are still going to need some of the same things. Why do we provide things like the budget, things like measurable outcomes, all these different things? Well, because A, they need to be able to trust us. B, guess what? Foundations get audited too. So there are some things they have to have. They have to have a copy of your 501c3 statement. They have to. They have to have a detailed budget. So all that being said, if you are applying online, or if they're giving you a format, it's going to be really easy for you to say, here I am online. Oh, all right. They want an organizational structure. I'm just going to go up here to my pantry and click on my organizational structure and paste it in. If you're applying online using their format, you should have a lot of the things available to you and just ready to cut and paste in. Did that answer your question, online questioner? Did that help? Okay, feel free to let me know if I didn't.
Yes.
Okay, okay, good. All right. So we figured out what kind of evaluation we're going to have, right? In-house evaluator, out-of-house evaluator. But what does the evaluation look like? I don't even know what this is. All right. Don't be afraid of big words. They don't hurt. Qualitative versus quantitative measurements. What's a qualitative evaluation? Qualitative evaluation is something open-ended. We're going to look at the details of only a small group. So, hey, did the soup kitchen help out with nutrition at all? You know what? These 5 guys are here every week. They're here for every meal. Let's ask them. Are they eating healthier? Do they feel like they have access to healthier foods? That's a qualitative evaluation, right? You're going to get comments from program participants, testimonials, collect little stories. It's very much a warm, fuzzy, feel good evaluation, which is not, again, not a bad thing, especially when we are talking about foundations that aren't the Carnegies of the world, right? We're talking about the local family foundation in your area. Okay. So the other one, quantitative, is based on stats. It's more scientific, as you can imagine. Again, going back to my example of maybe I work for the National Institute of Health and I got a huge grant. Guess what? They are definitely going to want a quantitative eval, and we should give them one, right? If I'm looking at a grant that's $150,000 from the MacArthur Foundation, I should be able to go back to them with some honest feedback. So in a quantitative evaluation, I'm going to have a large effort devoted to data collection. I'm going to pull all the data from everywhere I can possibly find. I'm going to code it and organize it. And the conclusion I provide is going to be given through an analytical approach, right? I'm going to take that data and I'm going to analyze it in a very, very structured, detailed way. Do you have any questions on that? If anyone wants more information on some of the things that I am not providing lots of information on, don't hesitate to reach out. The reason I'm going over them so quickly is because I don't foresee the folks here needing that information as much as other information. All right. I've never done an evaluation before. This thing has been terrifying. How do I know? How do I know if I gave them what they need? Here's a checklist. Double check it. Have your friend double check it. Have your neighbor double check it. Anyone at all. This can take time, folks. And that's okay. When it comes to grant proposals, all good things take time. All right. The budget. Here we are. We've arrived at the numbers part. So most grant requests are going to require 2 different budgets. They're going to want to see your organization's operating budget. They're going to want to see that you don't have $7 million in the bank. Because if you do, they're going to say, well, then why are you asking me for 20 grand, right? And then they'll want to see a budget for the project that you're trying to get them to support. You should give these budgets separately. Obviously, these are 2 very different animals, but you can use similar formats. Presenting your budget in 3 different ways is a great idea. Why? Because everyone understands numbers differently. Some people need a visual, some people need words, and some people just need a straight up accounting method, good old fashioned numbers. This is another area where you have the opportunity to break up the words in your proposal, provide some graphics, get some color in there. It's a good thing. So how do you do this? Well, you create a line item for every expense that you can foresee in the coming year. Every single one, it doesn't matter what it is. It's better to over budget than to under budget. After each quarter, take your operating budget and compare it to your actual expenses. Adjust it as needed or wait to the end of the year, whatever suits your purposes better. But it's important to keep in mind. Am I matching up with my operating budget? How far off am I? If you want to do a narrative budget, which I strongly encourage you to do, you should do, again, all 3 forms. A narrative format is exactly what you think, it's words. So below is an awesome example related to capital support. I'll let you read it later, but you can see it's very easy to digest, right? Now, if you don't like looking at numbers in that format, if maybe word problems were never your thing growing up, how about a graph? How about a pie chart? Pie charts are great. This is the visual format I was talking about. This breaks up your presentation, gives a little color. And people like me who appreciate visual examples really resonate with your budget being displayed to them this way. Oh. So we're going to talk about how to devise this project budget, right? You need to say two things. You need to indicate expenses and indicate revenue. Remember the action plan we created? We talked about it, right? And we said we're going to go through every step. Because guess what? Everything costs money. Every action item on there has some sort of cost associated with it. So take time to think through each step, what it's going to cost. This will take a few times. You're going to make your list a couple times and revisit it before you get it all. You're going to have someone else revisit it. You know, I'll use Mike as an example again, right? I'm going to say, Mike, we budgeted $200 for this Synod dinner for 15 people. And he's going to be like, you forgot the gratuity. Oh, you're right, Mike. 20%. Okay, it should be 240. So this is why it's important to confer with others. It's important to have a project team, right? You're obviously not carrying out this work alone. You may be writing the proposal for it alone, but you still need input from others. This gets your mind going, right? Here's my list. Oh, salaries, postage. Oh, I'm going to have to go pick up all those Purdue chickens that they donated to my soup kitchen. Oh, yeah, that's an 85-mile drive. Okay, how much gas is that going to cost? Am I taking my vehicle? Well, gee, you know, my tiny little Honda Accord isn't going to work for that. I'm going to have to rent a van, right? These are things we have to think through. This is also an opportunity for you to show the funder, hey, other people are supporting us too. This is exciting stuff, right? We've got 35 volunteers from, you know, whatever it may be, the teen center down the street. The teenagers are coming to volunteer. Oh yeah, and this little mom and pop grocery shop, they said that they're going to give us 3 crates of apples every week. We didn't have space right away, but the Muslim mosque down the street said that we could use their space for a soup kitchen while we build this space for ourselves, right? So these are in-kind gifts, in-kind contributions, right? The mosque didn't throw you $70,000 and say, hey, go rent a building. The teenagers didn't just say, here's some time in a box for you. You're going to take a few minutes to estimate the value. 30 teenagers, minimum wage, 8 hours a day. If they're volunteering 6 hours out of the week, how much money are you saving? How much would it cost to rent the size of the space and have electricity on in the size of the space that the mosque is lending you? The 3 apple crates being given to you, how much are those worth? Well, gee, inflation, I couldn't even begin to guess right now, to be honest with you. I think I spent like $4.50 on 3 apples the other day. So that would be something you would need to look into, right? Not only is this your way of being gracious and acknowledging the support and the partners that you've already created, but it's your way of building credibility. You're saying to this funder, hey, we just need your help to nudge us and get us over the hill. We already have all these folks on board. Can you help us too? So when you're nearing the end of finalizing this budget, you want to be very clear about what you want the funder to cover and what you have other entities covering, right? Important to say, you're not asking the funder to pay the mom and pop grocery store for those apples. You're asking the funder to pay the architect to build your building, right? So be specific. Who's helping you with what? Your budget needs to accomplish a couple different things. Again, with the little hands around the globe, You're telling the same story as your narrative is telling, but through numbers. Your numbers should absolutely link to the goals and objectives in your narrative. You're being very detailed. Detail is our friend. The worst thing you can do in a budget is say, miscellaneous column, $30,000. What is that? No, nothing should be miscellaneous. There should be no mysteries to your funder, right? You're not a political organization. You're not a campaign. There's no dollars that are just unaccounted for here. You need to show where they're going and what they're for. And again, show everything being covered by another entity. Show the volunteer contributions. Show the in-kind gifts. Non-personnel costs should be shown separately. And everything that you're showing in your budget needs to add up to enough money to accomplish the work, to do what you say you're going to do in your narrative, right? Don't shortchange yourself and don't upcharge them. Just be honest and transparent. So if you really want to establish credibility, which you do, you always do, especially if this is a new funder, right? Because you're making a friend and you want that friendship to last a while. You want them to keep coming back. So you're going to reinforce what you've already shared in other parts of your proposal. So if the architect said, gee, I charge $500, you're going to say the reason we're asking for $500 is because architect Smith charges $500. We got a quote from architect Jones. He charges $1,000. We got all these quotes. This is the one we're going with, and this is how much they cost. Give context to every single line item in your budget. Write a couple sentences. This is how I came to determine that the apples were worth this much. This is how I came to determine that it's going to cost this much to buy refrigeration for our food pantry. And this is where I'm going to purchase that refrigeration, and they're not going to charge to install it, or I'm paying this person to install it. Be specific. Details, details, details. The more you give them, the less questions they'll come back with. And questions can be hard. If they have questions, what does that mean? Well, they might be a tiny bit skeptical. Someone's questioning something. So give them no room for that. All right, we've reached the fun part, the summary, the abstract, if you will, and this is your time to shine. This is when you can be concise, but also give them everything. How long should it be? Well, it depends what you're doing. It can be a whole page, it can be a few lines. Use your best judgment. You're going to summarize the critical points of every other section. So make an outline of each section and create a concise and persuasive summary from that. This is basic. You're just pulling everything together using very persuasive language, convincing language, and summing it up. Here's a great example. Again, we're not going to go through this all together tonight. I'm going to stop and give you a minute and check and see if there's any questions so far in the chat.
Yes, there is one. Someone is asking you to speak more to the budget issue when an organization has monies, but perhaps there is need even when the organization has investments due to designated funds.
Okay. I don't have enough detail to really speak a great deal to that, but I'll give some examples. If you have $7 million in your budget, if you do, that's amazing. And I'm so happy for you. If you have that, and 6 million of it is accounted for with ongoing sustaining project initiatives that you've had in place for years and years. And the other $1 million is spent on the salaries, benefits, buildings, things you need to run this organization. It's understandable that you need more money. And you can justify why. You want to start a new initiative and there's no money for it. If you have $7 million in the bank, which again, congratulations, this is exciting stuff. Those of us that work for churches, I know all of you are raising your hands, probably can't say that. If you do, and you don't have any initiatives, you haven't done anything, and you're not putting any money into this new initiative. If you're saying, yeah, we haven't done anything in a while, but we want to do this, will you give us money to do it? Well, hold on. You're not doing anything. You have all this money and investments. What kind of money are you investing? Where's your investment in this project? Why are you asking me to invest in all of it? Does that help?
Yes, thanks, Elizabeth.
Of course. Okay, we're going to move on. You've seen this awesome abstract, which I think is one of the best. We're still going to talk about, though. What are you trying to do? You're trying to make them curious. Yes, I know it's the end of this thing. It's the end of your proposal, but you're still trying to reel them in. You're always trying to reel them in. And you're always trying to establish credibility. Why would I want to create curiosity? Didn't that kill a cat once? No, not this time. No animals die on my watch. Since you're not face to face with the funder, you have to draw them in through written conversation, right? You have to. Once they're wondering what you're doing and why, because you made them curious, they're going to be more engaged. They're going to think more about what they read in the budget. They're going to think more about what they read in your goals and objectives. They're going to flip back to those pages and they'll be more impactful. This is your final 1-2 punch, your final, this is why you need to fund this project, right? So yes, make them curious and make yourself credible. How can I make anyone curious about the fact that there's hungry people? Everybody knows that there's hungry people. Everybody knows that there's house fires. You can ask a provocative or inflammatory question, right? Just a brief statement. Why are there so many house fire related deaths? Why? And just imagine Diane Sawyer saying that, right? Or Barbara Walters. Use that tone. People stop and wonder. When you make a statement that's really a question, it's another thing you can do. You can share just enough information to make them interested, right? To draw them back into your detailed statement of need and your description. And again, share that others are supporting your project and others are interested. Use very vibrant language. Community momentum to address this problem is huge. 7 different foundations are aware of this need and able to help. What does that do? It gives you credibility and it makes them curious. Oh, well, 7 other foundations are giving. I guess we probably should too. Nope. Okay. So that, my friends, is the end of the part about proposals. Now, what we went over, is that everything you're putting in a proposal? No. Let's go back. Bear with me. Maybe don't look so you don't get dizzy. You're putting other things in the proposal too, things that are in your letter of inquiry. We didn't go over them, right? You're putting your organizational history in, your statement of need, your timeline, your goals and objectives. Oh, what's that at the bottom? Attachments and supplemental materials. That can be a lot of things. If your organization has brochures, pictures, extra pie charts or graphs detailing something. Whatever you think is going to convince the funder that your project is worthy, that should be attached. Absolutely. Let's go back to our pantry. you have all these things on hand and you're filling out an application online, it's probably pretty easy for you to go in, cut, paste, tailor it for that application. Obviously, you want to make sure that you double check anytime you cut and paste. I know I don't need to say this. You make sure you double check you have the right foundation's name in there. You're not writing to the Jones Foundation and addressing the Smiths, right? If they asked for the budget to be done in a certain way, if they gave you a form, you're going to take the information from your budget and paste it into their form, right? It's really important to gather these things and have them on hand. If you can gather these things and create your pantry and get it stocked up before you decide to write a proposal, before you decide a letter of inquiry, that will make your life that much easier. For example, if you're interested in researching who to get behind you, which funders to approach, while you're researching, that's a good time to stock your pantry, right? Get it ready. Then when you start building your relationship and you find out that they do want to receive a letter of inquiry, and then they say, oh, we also want to receive the proposal. A letter of inquiry was great. You've got everything ready. You're not reinventing the wheel. You're not, taking 10 days off of your day job to write a grant for your church, right? Which can happen if you're not careful. What did we not address tonight? We did not address federal grants. We addressed private grants. And I want to be very clear about that because I realize that I do not have that anywhere in my presentation. I will make sure to note that when I send it to you. Federal grants and private grants are very, very different animals. They would require a very different approach and different training. So if you're interested in going after a federal grant, let me just say I will pray for you daily during that process, and feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to walk alongside you. I'm not planning to do a training on that unless people really come at me and say that they'd like one, because I don't think it would be as beneficial. What questions do we have? Comments, thoughts? Snide remarks?
Again, you're welcome to raise your digital hand or put something in the chat.
Is there anything you'd like me to go over again? I'll be honest with you, I had very real concerns that we would not get through this in an hour and a half. So I'm truly shocked right now that we've gotten as far as we've gotten. Okay. I will be sending this to you as well as some PDFs of successful grants, letters of inquiry, samples of things you may find interesting, you may find helpful, as well as some books to look into, like I did last week. And I am always here to help with any questions you may have, or any tools that you may not have if you don't have research tools at your own desk. Mike, you look like you want to say something. Yes.
Yeah, a couple things in the chat. Can you address sources of grants, i.e. companies, organization?
So we talked a lot about that last week. Sources of grants would be foundations, private foundations, family foundations, and corporate foundations. If you work, I don't know, if you work for Amazon, if you work for Joe Schmo Plumbing in your county, they may have funds available to help with local endeavors, right? The company you work for may very well want to appear as though they are invested in the communities where their buildings reside, in which case they will have a grant structure in place. That's a corporate grant. And we can absolutely talk about that. I can do something on corporate grants if more people are interested. Otherwise, you're looking at private grants. And we talked a lot about how to find those last week, and I listed some resources, and I'm happy to talk offline again about that if there's more interest, if you want to reach out to me.
Another question is, someone's still unclear on whether we are able to pursue grants if the church sponsoring the program has funds in investments. When providing financial information on the organization for the grant, are we required to provide finances for the entire church or just the mission program for which we are requiring funding? Keep in mind that the mission program is attached to the church using your 501(c)(3). The church is willing to partially fund the program and provide volunteers to run the program, but not completely fund the program, even though they do have
Okay.
funds and investments.
Yeah, great question. And like I shared, most foundations are going to say, we would like to see an operating budget and we would like to see a project budget. So hiding things in your operating budget is not honest and will eventually come out one way or another. So you do want to provide all of that. And most foundations understand that, like any company, investments and savings are important. They're not going to ding you for not fully funding something. If they see you're invested with time, with people, and with some of your own money, they're not going to say, why aren't you funding the whole thing? But it's always important to be honest. Do not withhold your financial truth with them, right? It will come out. More questions?
How do we apply for a grant from the Synod, and what is the timeline?
I'm so glad you asked. And guess what? Hopefully you'll attend my workshop next month. The next deadline is May 1st, and I will be putting all of that information in the email I send to you. We are one of the easiest grants you could apply for, and we very intentionally do it that way. You will not need to use all the tools that you learned about tonight if you reach out to us and ask for support. So great question. I will be addressing it in the email, and I look forward to sharing another evening with all of you next month that is specifically devoted to Synod resources. And I hope there's interest there. I hadn't rolled it out quite yet, but now it's out there. So.
Anyone else? Elizabeth, any final words?
No, I just really appreciate you sharing your evening with me. I know that this was kind of content we really sped through, and I know that it can be a little dry, and I appreciate your time very much. I hope it was helpful, and I really appreciate Mike being here to handle all the tech, because I can do a grant budget, but I can't run tech. So thank you, Mike.
Elizabeth, it was my pleasure. I'll close this in prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to gather as a region of believers. We thank you for the information that was shared with us tonight. We pray that there is money out there for the many great outreaches and missions that are being done in our communities, in our churches. We ask that funding remains available and that it can go to those congregations and people who are in need of that. So just watch over everyone here, be with them as they travel from this place, as they continue to do your work. Bless us all and watch over us as we go forward. This we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. I appreciate each of you.